Hello, everybody, and welcome to We Are Texans Wednesday, and welcome to Curtis Podcast Network. I'm your host on the channel and avid Texans fan, Curtis Brown. And with me today, we have special guest, a co-host on the Texans Fan Battle podcast. You can find that on YouTube. You can also find any and all information that you could possibly ever want about this on Fan Battle Sports and fanbattlesports.com. These guys do great work. They've had a lot of really good guests lately, and they're on the upward trajectory. These guys are good guys. Go give them a follow, like, and subscribe, and do the same here. But VT, thanks for coming on, brother.
No problem at all.
Let's get into it, folks. We're going to be talking free agency, and since the last time we did a pod, so a lot has gone down. Brandon Cooks got traded. That freed up a bunch of cap space. Dalton Schultz gets signed. Basically, the best tight end we've had since Owen Daniels, and it's just because he exists. And then Devin Singletary is signed on a cheap deal to come in and be the spellback for Dameon Pierce. I mean, these are baller moves.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
what else? Well, I'm sorry. Well, let me just say this about Dalton Schultz. I don't think that they were targeting him at all. I think that it literally was not a mistake, but just happened.
Yeah.
And because if you look at all their other moves, all of their other moves have been pretty much low key. Even aside from Jimmy Ward, which you expected. Even rankings. He basically had his best season 2018 and hasn't done much since. Woods, same thing. He hasn't performed highly in the past couple of years. Obviously, he had Malik Willis and Tannehill thrown to him, but Schultz had a great season last year. And I think what happened was when they saw that he rejected the 3-year, $36 million contract, they threw their hat in the ring. And I don't think they really expected to win, and they did. And so I think we got lucky. We're lucky with that.
Yeah, I think he wanted to go out and prove himself. I think everybody was, maybe he thinks a little higher of himself than the Dallas Cowboys are willing to pay him or whatever. And he tested out the market, and the market wasn't as hot as he liked it, and ended up settling for a deal that wasn't Dallas because they went ahead and spent that money. But even with that, I mean, he's an immediate upgrade over everything in that tight end room. And we needed that bad.
Absolutely. I mean, we lost Jordan Akins, which is, kind of sad to say that was our best tight end.
Yeah.
But we lost Jordan Akins to the Browns, and so I was thinking, okay, we might take a tight end early on because it's such a great tight end class, like even at 33 or something.
Yeah.
I'm a big Darnell Washington guy. I don't know if Dalton Schultz changes the draft board. I think he might, but I do think that it's a great pickup for whatever QB we get. He's going to be a great safety blanket, and I think that's important to get for a rookie quarterback.
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely detrimental for a rookie quarterback. I mean, that's what drives, basically the tight end is like the closest thing to him on most plays. He's within the immediate line of sight. If that guy's good, your quarterback can feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that there's a solid safety valve. Shifting a little bit to Singletary, who, has just like 2,500 yards on his career, 16 touchdowns. He's not very bad out of the backfield for receptions. So I think this is going to be one of those things where he's still kind of basically like Dameon Pierce. Like stature-wise, the way that they run the ball, maybe Pierce is a little bit more aggressive with it, but I think Singletary is basically a little bit of the same with an added extra for the cheap.
I think Singletary, his big benefit is that he really can catch a little better. I think he has better hands than Pierce. I love Pierce. He's one of my favorite players on the team. However, he doesn't necessarily have the best hands. And I think that Singletary does provide that. I think Singletary is also just a change of pace back. He's obviously not going to be RB1. He likely could even be RB3. Boone could be RB4 because I think we will draft an RB in the later rounds, fourth or fifth or so. So I'm not expecting a ton of production. Like I don't think we're going to see Singletary get 700, 800 yards or anything like that. But I think that we needed another running back besides Pierce. We can't give Pierce 25, 30 carries every game. So this was a good move, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then with the trade of Cooks, that basically made both of those moves possible. And we get, we lost a pick because of some weirdness that went on with the Deshaun Watson era. We basically got it back, and then a future sixth. I'm cool with it. We got all we needed. We picked up some dudes. Casario's definitely riding the ship. There was a narrative about him, not being very good at what he's doing. Outside of this last draft, he was really spot on with quite a few players. But I mean, outside of that, I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, his free agent classes are terrible," but I think he was just building to have a larger free agent like pool of money to be able to throw at it, and I think that's kind of coming to fruition now.
I definitely was more critical of him in the earlier days of the free agency. I will say, as much as I do think that he did a really good job this free agency class, I'm gonna have to throw a little bit of shade on the Cooks trade because the rumors, not even just rumors, right? This was reported by pretty legitimate guys that at the time of the trade deadline, it looked like the Cowboys wanted us to eat $10 million, and they would have given us a third round pick. And apparently Casario wanted to push for a second round pick for that type of money that we were going to give up. We ended up paying $6 million of his salary and getting a fifth this year and a sixth next year. So I think that in my idea is that he should have essentially given in a little bit there. I would have obviously preferred a third round pick and given up 10 million versus what we got. But at the end of the day, he's gone. We recovered a fifth round pick, and so it is what it is. But I'll go out there and say, just for the whole Cooks thing, we lost that first overall pick because Cooks played on the last game of the year against the Colts, right? And so I think the whole situation was kind of messed up. But like I said, he's on the trajectory of being positive. I do think that he's going to kick ass in this draft, and he's been doing a really good job in free agency. And so if he continues, I'll be a fan.
I think the only reason that the Cooks trade worked out the way it did this time versus the trade deadline was basically, if you remember, I mean, after the trade deadline, Brandon Cooks was irate. He didn't want to play. He was very vocal about his, disinterest in being in a losing franchise. So I think that kind of tips the hand a little bit in somebody who's trying to sell him. It's like he already wants out. So, like, we'll just give you something instead of what you're asking for, because you got to move him anyway or cut him, and then you eat money. So I think we kind of got like our hands tied with that one.
I think so. I think a lot of people don't understand what Jack Easterby actually meant to Cooks. The firing of Jack Easterby was the immediate reason why Cooks wanted out. I know he said that he really doesn't want to be in a rebuild, but he knew that we were rebuilding with Davis Mills. It wasn't like he just randomly, oh, we're in a rebuild. I mean, he knew that, but that's the public excuse he has to use. The real reason, honestly, was we fired his mentor, the guy that he appreciated, the guy that he thought was going to take him to the level that he wanted to go to, and he was really mad about it. And that's what really will happen at the end of the day.
Who would have guessed that anybody would actually like Jack Easterby? All right. Well, let's shift our focus a little bit to the draft, and we'll kind of wrap up after this. But okay, so we're on the clock. It's pick 2. The Panthers have taken a quarterback. Well, let's just say that they take Stroud. So it's Bryce Young is available. I think everybody and their mother assumes that Bryce Young will be wearing a Houston Texans jersey if that's how it plays out.
Correct.
However, I would like us, trade back a spot or two. Like, I don't necessarily like how small he is. I don't think that bodes well for a longevity when you're talking about a career. Kyler Murray can't stay on the field. That's his closest physical comparison. And Kyler Murray's got 3 pounds on him, and that's literally the difference between those two guys. Um, do I think Bryce Young has an arm talent that can't be rivaled? Potentially. But I think his fragility kind of pushes him out of number two for me.
So I agree with almost everything you said. The problem is that, like, I'm not going to say the problem, that's a bad way of phrasing it. Let me give you the other side, all right? Because even though I agree with you, there is another side, and I think that should be represented. And frankly, Bryce Young is probably the best processor in the draft, just in terms of IQ. He can dissect defenses. He knows what he needs to do very, very quickly, more than pretty much even Stroud. So even though Stroud is probably the best, most accurate passer, Bryce Young knows where to put the ball and knows what's happening very, very quickly. That's really why I think he's going to succeed. He definitely has an issue with his size. But in a West Coast offense system, and if you're looking at a Slowick slash Shanahan style system, you can play to his strengths. And if we get a center at 33, which I think should be JMS, our O line should be pretty much fixed. We're hoping Kenyon Green steps up, so he's not as bad as he was last year. But let's assume that he does. Now you have a really good O line with Tunsil, set, Titus there, and now we have Shaq Mason, who's a top 10 guard. So your O line is set. So if your O line is set, you're scheming him up. He doesn't have a problem looking over center because of his anticipation, because he has really good anticipation. So, the problem with Russell Wilson, the problem with Kyler Murray is that he can't look over center. You don't have that problem with Bryce. The issue that I have with Bryce is his fragility. What you said, like, can he actually stand up to getting pummeled by 320-pound D linemen 40 times a year for 4 or 5 years and still have the same game? That's my concern. If they draft him, I have to imagine they've gone through that and they think that he can stand it, right? That he can stomach it. That is my concern. That's why I think if we're choosing between Bryce and C.J. Stroud, I would rather go Stroud. But I pretty much think the Panthers are going to go Stroud and we're going to take Bryce.
Yeah, I imagine that's exactly what's going to go down, barring some sort of crazy ass trade, because the Panthers did mention that they're open to trading. But I know that there's other things that we can draft at 2. And I think that there are other quarterbacks in this draft who could be a project, I guess would be the perfect word for it, but who could be a long-term answer and wouldn't have those fragility issues. Obviously, AR-15 is a name that comes up a lot now because of the way he lit up the combine, but he's a quarterback that needs to sit behind somebody and develop. I think that there's an injured quarterback right now, hailing from the University of Tennessee, who could be scooped second, third round. And while I don't know at all that he would be available day one, I think that if he's available at all during the next season, he will be an instant improvement over whatever we got going on in the QB room. And you'll have promise going into next season because he's already like 26 years old. So he's older than most of the guys who've been in the league 2 or 3 years on this team. So I think he brings a leadership quality that offense really needs.
It's funny that you mentioned him because I actually had this discussion today with James from Texans Unfiltered, and we were going back and forth on Twitter about it. And my problem with Hendon Hooker is I believe he's incredibly talented, but there's 2 issues, as you mentioned. His age is an issue, and secondly, he comes from an offense that's basically air raid, and so air raid doesn't necessarily translate to a pro-style system like an NFL offense right off the bat. So if he's 26, he might take a year to actually learn that. So if you think about it, say he's 27, he starts, and now he's going to be almost 30 or so by the time he's ready for his second contract, and now you pretty much are fighting against father time. You have pretty much 5-year window. When you draft a quarterback even if it's in the third round or whatever, you really are trying to get a quarterback for the next 10 years plus. And with him, your window is really, really short. And I think that it is unfair to expect him to last as long as Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers,
Right.
where he can last until 39, 40 years old. And I think that's a negative. I think he would be great for a team that isn't necessarily looking for a long-term franchise quarterback, um, but I don't think he's right for the Texans.
I mean, I'll give you credit where it's due. The offensive style in Tennessee is definitely not translatable directly. But I definitely think he's really good at reading the field. He'll get taken in the second or third round just because to a team that doesn't necessarily need a franchise quarterback. It'll probably be someone weird like the Jets.
I
And,
was just gonna say that.
and he'll sit behind Aaron Rodgers, and then he'll take over when Rodgers inevitably goes to the Vikings because he wants to do exactly what Brett Favre does. Um, and he'll be the one that probably brings a ring to the Jets for the first time since Namath, and it's gonna piss me off. But, but yeah, and then Anthony Richardson's the only other quarterback in this draft to me outside of the big two and Hooker that just jumps off at me because of his raw athleticism. He's young as hell. He's big. He's fast. He's got an arm. He can throw it a country mile. But the problem I notice is he doesn't necessarily have the best touch and accuracy on passes. There are a lot of times where he, rolls into pressure. His pocket presence is just F tier for most of the game. For anybody who's not sure, just go check out the Florida State game. That was just awful. But people are saying he's a first round draft pick. I don't buy that.
I mean, I think Carolina, I don't think they will do it, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they pick AR first overall. And the thing about it is you have to use projections, I believe, because when you're drafting players from college, you can never be sure what they are because college is very different from the NFL. If all we wanted to do was look at game film and nothing else, then Baker Mayfield would have won a Super Bowl by now. So I mean, I think that you have to use some form of projection, and I think that his athleticism shows that when plays break down, which they always do in the NFL, that he can actually use his legs, use his athleticism to get the first down or get that touchdown. He's basically a one-man machine at one point. I don't say that very often, but the thing about it is that if you don't have the best O-line, it actually won't matter as much because of his athleticism. If you have Bryce or Stroud, you need to have a pretty damn good O-line. With AR-15, you don't. And Anthony Richardson, in addition to his athleticism and his arm strength, I think the main issue there is just mechanics. And I think this is the problem with Mullen at Florida. He does not develop individuals right away. If he doesn't see you as a starter, you're on the back burner. You're not getting resources from anybody. He didn't develop Dameon Pierce, and look at the stud that Dameon Pierce is now. And I think that if AR-15 actually had an individual to develop him properly and sit down and actually go from day one mechanics, that his accuracy would improve considerably. Because I don't think his accuracy is an issue of him not knowing necessarily how to throw the ball. It's just he doesn't set his feet properly. He doesn't have issues where he's just staring down receivers either. He's actually looking downfield. So you can see some of the good stuff, and when the good stuff is really, really good, it's amazing. And the problem is that he's so inconsistent that it's hard to imagine him in the NFL. But I think if you can project and if you believe that you can fix him with all the mechanics and stuff, I believe that he could eventually be the best quarterback out of this draft in 3-4 years, depending where he goes. And if he does go to Carolina or if he goes to the Colts, I think you should be worried. If he goes in other places, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like historically, you don't draft quarterbacks out of Ohio State or Alabama and expect them to be the next guy. Like Mac Jones is a placeholder in New England. They felt so confident about him. The next year they drafted another quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tua Tagovailoa. He's got injury issues. He'll probably be moved on from soon. Um, Ohio State quarterbacks, I can't think of a good one in the NFL.
I mean, I will say that I don't really like the whole college and university thing because you could say the same thing about Patrick Mahomes. What was Texas Tech?
Well,
You could say the
here's
same thing about Josh Allen too, right? So
right. That's actually my second point here. Schools that are not supposed to generate quarterbacks are usually the ones that produce the best quarterbacks. So, like the big schools, they have a lot of talent, they have a lot of eyes on them, they have a lot of guys who these other schools would die to get on the field with. You know what I mean? Um, but those guys have to go and make a name for themselves at a smaller school. They have to play damn near perfect to get on the map. Just because Texas Tech doesn't get any sort of coverage in Tennessee. I didn't know about Patrick Mahomes until the draft was starting. I mean, they talked about his arm strength and whatnot, but that was basically it. Uh, Josh Allen, everybody's like, "Oh, I played at a small school." He's amazing. I think there's something to be said about playing on uber talented teams that are uber talented year in and year out, because it's hard to exactly quantify if the greatness is because of this player or because of this player. You know what I mean? It's hard to
I,
pinpoint.
I understand. I mean, that's one of the problems with Iowa State is that they have some of the best rosters, right? Um, Iowa State had two of the best receivers. Um, Two of them are actually two of the O line is being drafted, or actually more than that. Two of them are in the first round, I believe. So, I mean, you have such amazing talent in Ohio State, and I get that. However, I think you kind of have to separate that. I think Ryan Day also has been changing the program a little bit to make the quarterbacks better. I also know that like they really wanted to have Stroud. Actually, they were going to do a little RPO stuff too, and then they decided he was such an accurate passer that they changed the system around him. So I think that he's actually built for the NFL already. I have some issues with him because of how great the receivers are, like I said, and the O line is, and he's going to go into essentially one of the worst situations pre agency in NFL. Now,
Yeah.
now with free agency and the draft, that situation is changing. So I'm not necessarily as worried as I was pre-free agency of where he's going to come in if we would have taken him, and I'm not as worried with Bryce Young if we get Bryce Young because of those situations. Am
Yep.
I still a little worried about his size though? Yeah, and I don't, and I've said this before, but it's probably true. I'm gonna have to hold rosary beads every Sunday when I watch him because I'm gonna make sure like this dude don't hit him, don't hit him.
Don't break my quarterback. Yeah. No, I understand that. I'll be on pins and needles over here, just like, come on, stay healthy. Um, I don't know. There's so much to talk about with this draft, folks. Like, good God, this is a talent laden draft. I in a perfect world where I'm controlling the Texans, I'm probably not drafting at 2. I would trade back with like the Cardinals or something, pick up something extra, then draft. I don't know, like Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech or something, and then with 11 probably get, or 12 rather. Sorry, probably a wideout. Honestly, I think we need to find a wideout number 1. We just don't have one.
I think you're right. We definitely need an X receiver. The only problem is I don't think there's an X receiver in this class. I think what I would do is I would take Anthony Richardson, but I wouldn't trade down. And I know that sounds crazy. How would you take him at 2? The problem is there are so many QB needy teams that if we try to trade down, I don't think we'd end up getting any of the QBs, frankly. I don't think we can just trade down to 3 because Cardinals, they're not going to want to trade up, right? So we can't really go down because they're not in a position to go up. I think they're actually in a position to trade down themselves. I think they're looking for someone that they can trade down to. So I don't really think there is a position where we could go because we got the Colts at 4. So I think you're stuck at 2, and I think you have, if you were going to take AR, you take him at 2. What I would do at 12 is I take an edge. I would take Van Ness, someone like that, and at 33 you take JMS. For a receiver, I would go later rounds. I would go either A.T. Perry, Xavier Hutchinson, Jonathan Mingo, someone like that.
Yeah.
Charlie Jones from Purdue, the guy that no one's talking about because he's 24 years old, and I get it, but he's not a quarterback. But the thing is, he leads all of the country in contested catches. No one's talking about him because he's 5'10", and he's 24 years old. So there are 4 or 5 later round receivers in this class that I would take. And at the top end, get your center, so you solidify that trench, solidify the O-line, get an edge so you can actually stop the run, because that's something we've failed to do now for 3 years in a row. And then you get your receivers at the lower end, and next year try to get your X, like shoot for Marvin. Like that would be the goal. Yeah. And I think that would be my strategy, because I think Jason, Addison, Zay Flowers, I don't think that they will be a long-term X, even if they become an X here for this year. I think once you move on to 2024, they'll be moved out because they're not a true X. And so do you spend your 12th overall pick on them? I tend to say no.
Yeah, I think 12 is probably the more likely spot that we trade back, if we trade back at all. And as we know, Casario's not afraid to do that. A couple of receivers that you didn't mention, also from the University of Tennessee, Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. Now, they have questionable first, second round grades on them, but let's just say we trade back to like 20. Cedric Tillman's let's just say, for whatever reason, the top 3 wide receivers are gone. Don't know why, but they're gone. Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt are top of the board. Would you go for either one of them?
I go Jalen Hyatt. I think Jalen Hyatt is amazing. I think that a lot of people thought that he was going to run like a 4.2 something, because there was a lot of hype around that. If you follow Lance Zierlein, he was hyping up Jalen Hyatt a lot. He was basically saying that he was going to run like a 4.2, I think 4.23 or 4.24 or something like that, and that he was projecting that the Texans would take him at 12th overall because he was going to have that type of combine. Now, that didn't happen, and I'm not saying you take him at 12, but would I be upset if they take him at 33? No. But I will say that if they don't get me my center that I've been asking for since 2021, heads will roll. You got to get it. You got to get JMS, Tippmann. You got to get one of those top-tier centers, because we can't have this again.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've been needing a center longer than that, since Ben Jones left, basically. Yeah. Well, we're running out of time here, man. I want to go ahead and thank you for coming on, and thank you for your time. Folks, again, go check out the Texans Fan Battle podcast. Check out the Fan Battle Sports channel, and check out their website, fanbattlesports.com. These guys do a lot of great work. They're good people. Like and subscribe to them. Like and subscribe on this video. Be good people, folks.